The mist was still hanging low over the lake when I felt the first tug on the line. Soft, steady, the kind of morning where the water looks like brushed steel, and the only sound is the slow whir of your reel cutting through silence. The dock boards were damp beneath my boots, smelling like wet cedar and summer algae. Then I heard tires on gravel, not one vehicle, two. I turned and saw a state wildlife truck easing up near the path. Two officers stepped out, clean uniforms, clipboards, calm faces. Behind them stood our HOA president, arms folded across his pressed windbreaker, expression already decided.
As you can see from the proposal, the $30,000 annual investment covers comprehensive lake management, ensuring the sustained beauty of our
environmental
community.
disruption in this protected community waterway. The word protected lingered. The president added, "He's been altering the ecosystem without board approval." I set my rod down gently. The officer asked evenly, "Do you have documentation for any fish stocking activity?" I looked him in the eye. "Yes," I said, "all of it." And that's when I realized this wasn't about fishing. I'm 46. I run a small contracting business now. But before that, I spent 12 years as a technician with the Army Corps of Engineers. Water tables, soil reports, retention systems. I've never been the loudest guy in the room, but I've always been the one who reads the fine print. We bought this house for stability. Good schools, quiet streets, a lake that was supposed to be the centerpiece of the neighborhood, only it wasn't. The developer stocked it once, years ago, then moved on. After that, it was neglect. Algae blooms every July, thin, stunted fish. Kids stopped bothering to cast lines because nothing bit. I didn't complain on Facebook. I called the state wildlife office, asked questions, filled out forms, paid out of pocket for native largemouth bass and bluegill fingerlings, filed an ecological assessment, secured permits. If you're going to improve something, do it the right way. I didn't do it for credit. I did it because my kids deserved better water to grow up around. But quiet initiative makes some people uncomfortable, especially the HOA president. Our HOA president was a retired corporate executive named Halvorsen, always pressed collars, always talking about process integrity. He loved procedures the way some men love trophies. Mostly when they worked in his favor. I read regulations because I don't like surprises. He read them because he liked leverage. A few months before the officers showed up, the board had been pushing a new lake management contract, $30,000 a year. Aerators, chemical treatments, quarterly assessments. The landscaping company bidding on it just happened to be owned by a board member's cousin. They called it proactive stewardship. Then the fishing improved. Neighbors started posting pictures of bass on the community page. Comments rolled in about how great the HOA's lake revival was going. Halvorsen never corrected them, but he did start watching me. Every time I walked down to the dock with my tackle box, I'd see him from his back patio, coffee mug in hand, studying the water like it owed him. Something control wasn't just about money. It was about credit. And once he realized I had both proof and permits, the tone shifted. The certified letter showed up 3 days later. DAL, Oxalide Environmental Modification of Common Property. $500 fine. Immediate cease and desist from all fishing activity, pending an ecological compliance review. I read it twice at the kitchen counter while the coffee went cold. They weren't accusing me of fishing. They were accusing me of altering shared property without board authorization. That language matters. I drafted a short response. Calm, professional. I attached the state permit reference numbers and the hatchery license ID. Not the full packet. Just enough to show I wasn't guessing. I hit send. No reply. Instead, a second letter arrived a week later. This one mentioned potential lien proceedings to cover a future damage assessment. That word, lion, travels fast in a neighborhood. The Facebook group lit up. Vague posts about irresponsible environmental tampering. No names, but everyone knew. When I walked the dog, conversations lowered. I kept fishing, legally, quietly, because there was something bigger in my file cabinet they hadn't asked for yet. When intimidation didn't move me, they escalated beyond letters. standing on that dock with 2 wildlife officers and my HOA president hovering behind them. I could feel every window in the neighborhood watching. Halverson spoke first. "We believe he introduced non-native species without authorization. It's destabilizing the ecosystem. Non-native." That was the angle. The senior officer flipped a page on his clipboard. "Sir, what species were introduced?" "Largemouth basin bluegill," I said evenly. He looked up. "Source? License in-state hatchery." Halvorsen shifted. "Without HOA approval." The officer didn't react to that. "Do you have documentation?" "I do," I said. Then I added, "I'd prefer to present everything at once, during a formal review." There was a pause, long enough for Halvorsen to assume I was bluffing. Instead of writing a citation, the officer nodded. "All right, we'll schedule a site inspection and document review." Until then, no enforcement action. You could feel the air change. The board had expected handcuffs, or at least a warning. What they got was procedure, as the officers walked back toward it. Halvorsen's walk toward back truck. Halvorsen's confidence didn't look quite as solid. He thought this would scare me. He didn't realize I was waiting for them to put it on record. And while the inspection was pending, they made a mistake they couldn't take back. It came in at 9:42 p.m. subject line. Lake Enforcement Strategy. They meant to send it internally. They copied the entire board, copied me too. The message wasn't subtle. One member wrote that state involvement could be leveraged to reinforce the necessity of approving the exclusive lake management contract. Another said once enforcement confirmed unauthorized activity, homeowners would understand the need for professional oversight. They were talking like the outcome was already decided, like I didn't have permits, like this was theater. I didn't respond. I screenshotted it, saved it in 3 places, then called an old friend from my core days who practices property law now. He listened. Quiet, then he said, "Do nothing publicly. Let the inspection happen. Let them commit to their narrative. If you're going to improve something, do it the right way." That line stuck. This wasn't about winning an argument online. It was about timing. Inspection day came quicker than they expected. And facts have a way of replacing assumptions when someone actually checks the paperwork. Inspection day was quiet. No audience this time. Just the senior officer, state biologist, Halvorsen, and me. The biologist worked methodically. Water samples in clear vials, dissolved oxygen readings, a slow sweep with an electrofishing rig along the shoreline. Numbers, not opinions. Bass surfaced first, healthy, broad across the back. Bluegill next, strong color. Good size for their age. The biologist nodded to the officer. All native. Population looks balanced. No invasive indicators. That's when I opened the folder. State-issued stocking permits. Hatchery receipts with batch numbers. An ecological impact memo outlining projected growth curves. And an email from the regional wildlife supervisor dated 8 months earlier approving the plan. The officer flipped through each page carefully. "Everything here appears compliant," he said. Then he looked up. "I will need to document who reported the violation." Halvorsen's posture changed. Shoulders tighter. Jaw set. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was a recorded complaint tied to names. Public records don't disappear. The officer closed his folder. "I recommend presenting these findings at your next HOA meeting." That's when the balance shifted. The clubhouse was full that night. Folding chairs scraped against tile. Papers shuffled. The air conditioning hummed, like it was trying to cool more than the room. Halvorsen opened with his usual tone about protecting property values and environmental responsibility. Measured, corporate, safe. Then the wildlife officer stood. He read from a prepared statement. No violations. Stocking fully permitted. Species native and appropriate. Lake health improved 18% over prior year metrics based on oxygen levels and biomass sampling. A low wave of murmurs moved through the room. I stood when he finished. Kept it simple. I funded the stocking myself to avoid a fee increase. I followed state guidance from day one. Then I placed a printed copy of the email on the front table, the one about leveraging enforcement. Silence settled hard. The officer cleared his throat. For the record, knowingly submitting misleading complaints can carry penalties. A board member tried to reframe it as a communication misunderstanding. No one bought it. There was no shouting, no gavel pounding, just the slow unraveling of authority in real time. And embarrassment, I've learned, is only the first consequence. 2 weeks later, a formal letter arrived from the state. It wasn't explosive. It was clinical. The HOA received a written warning for misuse of the wildlife complaint process and a reminder that knowingly inaccurate filings could trigger fines or further review. A copy went into public record. That part matters. Our HOA's insurance carrier was also notified, since false reporting tied to governance decisions can create liability exposure. Suddenly, the board wasn't discussing fish. They were discussing risk. Halverson sent an email citing personal reasons for stepping down as president. No apology, no admission, just a vacancy. The proposed lake management contract disappeared from the next agenda without explanation. There were no sirens, no headlines, just the slow collapse of influence when paperwork doesn't line up with reality. Through all of it, I never raised my voice. I didn't have to, because once the record is clear, power shifts quietly, and the lake that started as a battleground began to look like something else entirely. The mist still rolls in the same way at sunrise, water flat as glass, reeds whispering along the bank. Only difference now is the company. Some mornings there are 3 or 4 of us on the dock. Kids pulling in bluegill, laughing when they splash their sneakers. No one arguing about permits, no one measuring control. We formed a volunteer lake stewardship committee. Open books, state guidance, documented decisions, simple transparency. Turns out, when people can see the paperwork, they relax. I still keep copies of everything in a waterproof folder. Not because I expect trouble. Because responsibility doesn't end when the noise fades. If you're going to improve something, do it the right way. Let me ask you something. Has your HOA ever tried to weaponize authority? And would you have shown the permits immediately or waited? Next week, I'll tell you about the board that tried to seize a veteran's garden.